I know so many of us are like, I don't respect their perspective. Well, if you don't respect their perspective, guess what? They're not going to respect yours. And what we're learning here is we can hold compassion for two truths to exist at the same time. Your opinion is valid, my opinion is valid. Hey babes, welcome to Codependency Alchemy, your go-to podcast and community for the raw and sometimes uncomfortable truths we need to face to create relationships that actually feel good. Together, we'll explore what's underneath patterns like codependency, anxious attachment, and the mother wound, and learn how to build authentic, nurturing relationships. I'm Alyssa, your favorite codependency and relationship coach, teaching you all the lessons that I've learned the hard way, so hopefully you don't have to. If you've ever struggled with boundaries, today's episode is for you. We're going to dive into what it means to set a boundary, what it looks like to enforce a boundary, and all of the nuances in between. And if you're not new here, you've been listening to the podcast a while and you haven't already rated or reviewed it, please, please, please take a moment, just hit pause and leave a rating or review because it helps get this podcast in front of new eyes and people who are looking to have these types of conversations. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me, for letting me walk alongside you in your journey. I love connecting with you guys, so please don't stop sending the DMs because it is such a gift to witness you guys in your journey. All right, you guys, let's talk boundaries. Something that we probably could talk ad nauseum about and something that so many of us struggle with. We're going to dive into it. This episode is actually inspired by a conversation that we're having in our Codependency Alchemy chat on Substack. And I just felt like it would be really, really beneficial to lay out some things about boundaries that I think we miss, some misconceptions around boundaries, and most importantly, give you guys a sort of script or an outline that you can use and implement in your life with the people that you're noticing you're needing to set boundaries with. Okay, so I'm going to briefly share a little bit about what one of the members shared in our chat and give you my own personal journey with boundaries because there are certain topics and things that I've needed to set boundaries around, specifically with my family, which can sometimes be the hardest people to set boundaries with. So this member shared that she has been in this relationship with her boyfriend for 2.5 years, and she has an amazing relationship with him. However, she shares that since her and her boyfriend got together, she's had some issues with her mom telling her that this person isn't good enough for her. It sounds like her mom is pretty vocal about who she should be with, the type of man or person that would be good enough for her. And it's really brought up a lot of anxiety for this member and taken a toll on her relationship ultimately. So she's feeling torn because she realizes that she's still young. She's trying to figure things out, but she finds that whenever anybody says anything about her relationship, mainly her mom, she kind of freaks out and wants to run away. And she's like, is this relationship even worth it? Do I stay in this relationship? And maybe it would be easier if I was just single again and I wouldn't have to worry about these things. And so her question in our chat was just trying to figure out, does she leave this relationship and all of the anxiety that comes with it, or, does she stay? And I left probably a novel long response to this, and I'm going to share it here with you guys because I think oftentimes that is what we end up leaning towards when we struggle with codependency, because we are, at this root, people pleasers. It is almost easier to avoid conflict by just saying, okay, fine, you're right. And in my experience, what I noticed for myself is oftentimes I would defer to other people's judgment because one, I didn't trust my own. And two, that means I'm responsible for the outcome if I make the choice. And I think this is the hard, covert thing that a lot of us do is we give our choices up to somebody else. And when we do that, ultimately, we're not the one to blame. So we think really we're making the choice ultimately. And so the responsibility is ours. But I think it kind of tricks this part of us. And we say, okay, well, if I defer to my mom, so say in this situation, okay, mom says I should be with someone better. I'm going to break up with him. And say 10 years down the road, this person is all you think about. And it was just like that one that got away, right? You get to defer blame to your mom because your mom said this person wasn't good enough, and then it was never your fault, right? It was your mom's fault, and then you become a victim of whatever the circumstances. The silly way that I used to do this, and okay, I'm not even going to say used to because this actually came up when I went on a trip recently by myself. I will defer food options to other people. So I didn't know what to eat. I text Justin or text my mom, hey, should I get, steak fajitas or should I get a quesadilla? And it's so fucking silly. It is silly. This is a silly example. But why am I asking them to choose for me? Because if I make the choice for steak fajitas instead of quesadilla, and the steak fajitas are like meh, and I know that I would have loved the quesadilla because who doesn't? Then I get to be like, well, Justin made the choice. And so I'm actually not to blame because he chose for me. Right. So I was catching myself wanting to do this on this trip to Palm Springs I went to recently. I got to speak at this women's conference on growing communities, and it was a really great conference. I won't get into it, but I went solo. And what am I doing? I'm texting my mom, like, do I wear this dress or this dress? I'm texting Justin, do I order this or do I order this? And I did that like ad nauseum on the first day. And that night when I was laying in my bed, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm uncomfortable because I'm traveling on my own. I'm speaking at this women's conference. I'm speaking on a stage. I've never spoke on a stage before. So I'm a little dysregulated. And so what am I trying to do? I'm trying to defer choices to other people because I'm struggling and I don't trust myself in this moment. And so really what I need to do is create safety in my body, right? And so I share all of this, the silly deferring choices like food as a very real example of how this can show up in our life. And to have this awareness, a question that came in recently is like, okay, I've done so much healing around codependency. Now what? Well, now you have awareness. And you're going to see all the ways that this bleeds into your life or shows up in your life or your relationships or your work, even. And because you have this awareness, you're going to bring curiosity to ways that you get to build more self trust, build more resilience, and build a deeper connection with yourself. That's the point of life, is to feel the feels, to stay curious, and to play with the things that you learn along the way. And there's going to be time periods or periods of your life. I'm going on a tangent, guys. There's going to be periods of your life where those things don't come up as often. And then there's going to be times in your life where you feel like they come up every 2 minutes. And the point is you meet yourself where you're at in that moment. As the bird just flies by in the window. I love it. Okay, so the point of telling you the Palm Springs trips and the food situation is to show you where we may be avoiding taking responsibility. And in avoiding taking responsibility, what we're really trying to avoid is being responsible for the blame or the disappointment or the mistake that we might have possibly made in choosing. And that comes from a deep-seated lack of trust within ourselves. And so even though I've done all this work for all these years, I can sit there and be like, oh, I still don't trust myself. I'm still going, like, why am I doing this? Instead of doing that, which is more blame, which is more shame, which is more judgment, which will just spiral me into those core wounds and stories of not being good enough, doing it wrong. What I get to say to myself actually is, okay, this is here for me right now. I'm experiencing a lack of trust. Let me learn more about that. What's here right now? What am I experiencing right now? Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I'm doing something scary that I've never done before. And It's having me, lean on old patterns of diverting responsibility. Okay, what does that part of me want? It wants to know that it's safe, that it's okay. What does that part of me need? It needs reassurance that no matter the outcome, everything is going to be fine. I can order the steak fajitas, and if they're trash, I can go get quesadillas. Like that's the real truth of it all. So going back to this person's situation that, many of you guys might resonate with around just feeling anxiety around your relationship and people having judgments or opinions on your choices, whatever that choice may be. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a job change, maybe it's moving to another city, whatever it is. What I ask this member is, do you really not want to be with this person? Right? Whatever that choice is for you, whatever that decision is for you, because of him or your relationship? Or are you contemplating being alone and single because of the stress that your mom, friends, coworkers, boss is putting on you regarding it? Right? So if you are struggling with something that people have a lot of opinions about, ask yourself, do you really want to stop doing the thing, or do you really want to avoid making that decision because it truly doesn't feel aligned for you? Or are you doing it because the anxiety and the stress that's being put on you by others is not worth it? Right? So what I told her is, if it's the latter, that you're contemplating being alone just because the stress and the anxiety and the pressure from your mom is just too much, then the next invitation would be to see where the choice to leave comes from a place of not wanting to take responsibility, right? What I've been talking about here with you guys. And it's responsibility for enforcing boundaries with someone you love, someone you're close with. Oftentimes, we become complacent and let other people dictate our lives because we don't want the pressure or the responsibility of making our own choices. I'm just saying this again to maybe seal it in for some of you. And for me, when I dug even deeper into this for myself, the root of that was because I didn't trust myself to make, quote unquote, the right choice. And so I didn't want to be the one responsible if I did happen to make the wrong choice. So I just went with what other people told me they thought I should do, because ultimately, then we cannot be blamed. These are the hard truths, right, babes? If we can't be blamed, then we can point the finger at whoever's advice that we took, and then we become a victim to the outcome. Okay, so I'm just painting that picture again. You feel into, does that feel resonant for you? Does it ping something for you? If it doesn't resonate, leave it. It's not for you. That's totally fine. There were a lot of places in my life where this was true. And it's that uncomfortable true. It's that hard truth type of true. It's that I don't want that to be true, but I kind of know it is. And the shame and the guilt that tends to like hop on top of that and cover you with, remember that this pattern was very important at a point in time in your life, right? Again, probably in childhood. It was just better, easier, safer to go this route for whatever reason. I can think back to my childhood where I took initiative and I spoke my truth, and I was told I was wrong. I was told I was bad, and it was shoved under the rug, specifically around my abuse. So it was safer for me to be like, you're right, right? Because am I going to be, condemned and neglected by both my parents? I would rather just be like, you're right. I was still a child. I still needed support from them. I still needed them to survive, whether it was food on the table or roof over my head. It was advantageous for me to say, you're right. And so what did I do? I found more and more ways to give them the power over my life. That's why I still probably go to my mom to be like, what do I eat? I don't do it like in my day to day, but when I was alone on my trip, I was going back to that, texting her pictures of me in my dresses and being like, what dress do I wear tonight? Do I wear my hair in space buns? Do I wear my hair down? And being like, whoa, here's this pattern again. Being curious. So also what I shared with this person, if you actually enjoy your relationship with this person and the stress and the anxiety comes from people who are telling you that you shouldn't be with him for whatever their reason is, then we get to explore boundaries. And when we're exploring boundaries, especially with people who we have these close relationships with, especially with family, there's going to be discomfort that comes up around that, especially if you grew up in homes where boundaries were not respected or honored or appreciated or even met by the other person. And if you grew up in society in this century, most of us were not taught boundaries. Most of us were not taught what it looked like to enforce a boundary. Most of us were shamed or guilted or judged for having them. And that led us to not even enforcing our own boundaries or respecting our own boundaries, because it meant that we lost family. It meant that we lost friends. It meant that we lost our communities. And as humans, we have this deep need for belonging and acceptance. And so boundaries are really scary if it threatens our belonging and our families or in our communities. And so I definitely want to name that because I get it. It is scary. It really is. And in a lot of scenarios, it's not safe. I have to name that too. For me, what I've had to ask myself, is it worth me enforcing a boundary if it means that I am speaking my truth and that I'm standing up for myself and that I am living an authentic and autonomous life? For me, if somebody on the receiving end of my boundaries is going to punish me for them, then there is grief, but I desire to live an authentic life. And if that means that that person isn't a part of that life anymore, I'm going to grieve them. I'm going to mourn that friendship, that relationship, that connection, because duh. However, I have lived so much of my life living for others and creating comfort for others that I refuse to do it for the rest of my life. I'm grateful and I'm lucky enough to have multiple generations of women still alive in my life, and I use them as my North Star, as my guiding light, because I see how much they have overridden their own boundaries, their own needs, and I've seen the disservice in their own lives. They did what they needed to do. That's where they were at. I don't wrong them for that. I get why they've done it, right? It kept them safe in a lot of ways and is keeping them safe in a lot of ways. But I know too much now in my life to live that way. And I will say for myself, it has actually, oh my gosh, there's literally a crow like sitting right in front of my window looking at me as I'm saying this, whatever that means. I feel like it's a message. I'm not sure what it is. But I have learned for myself that in the places that have been the hardest for me to enforce boundaries, which has been with my family, it is challenging at first, but ultimately I actually have a deeper relationship, a more honest, vulnerable, connected relationship with those people who I've enforced boundaries with than I did 10 years ago. And it's because I feel seen and I'm speaking my truth. And it's actually built a deeper respect in those relationships. It wasn't easy at first and it didn't look pretty at first, but now like I'm like, whoa, this was totally worth it. And I'm so glad that I did it. Like they've come around. It's almost like, well, it is like I am respected. I feel respected. I feel strong and in my conviction. And I think that has built this type of relationship and connection with these people where you show people how you desire to be treated and then they show up for it. You know what I mean? Or they don't, right? And that's where the grief and that's where the mourning will come in. It's just inevitable on this journey. I've learned to walk with that. But now what I want to give you guys is a script and a practice and a framework that you can use when it comes to setting boundaries with people that you're realizing boundaries are required or needed. So what I shared with this member was boundaries with your mom gets to look like, I hear you, and I know your take on my relationship, and I respect your perspective. Okay. However, right now, I am choosing him as my partner, and I need you to trust my choices. I'm not open to having conversations about my relationship with you at this time. When you bring up my relationship, I'm going to need to either walk away or ask that we change the subject. Thank you for understanding and respecting what I need right now. Okay, so that's the script that I gave this person that I feel like you could pop into most things. But to give you an outline, this boundary setting has 3 parts. The first part is validating. You're validating what you're hearing this person saying. I hear and know your take on my relationship, and I respect your perspective, right? This allows the person to know I hear that you have an opinion about my relationship, and I can respect your perspective. This is where 2 truths get to exist at the same time. I know so many of us are like, I don't respect their perspective. Well, if you don't respect their perspective, guess what? They're not going to respect yours. And what we're learning here is we can hold compassion for 2 truths to exist at the same time. Your opinion is valid. My opinion is valid. Right? So we're first validating. I hear you, whatever they are saying. Second piece to this boundary setting is the boundary. I'm not open to having conversations about my relationship with you at this time. I added at this time because you never know what's going to happen. At another time, you might want to have a conversation. This is the thing about boundaries, they're fluid, they are not fixed. They will change as your relationship with people changes. They will grow and expand with you as you grow and expand. Okay. In the beginning of healing my codependency, I had to have really strong boundaries all over the place. The more safe I feel within myself, the more trust I have within myself, the less boundaries I feel like I need to have in all of the places. Okay, so remember that boundaries ebb and flow. So that's why I like to use at this time or right now. Okay, if you don't want to use that, that's fine. The third part to this boundary setting is how you will enforce the boundary, because it's your responsibility to enforce the boundary. It's not theirs, your responsibility. So if you want your boundary respected, it will require you doing something when the boundary is not respected, I should say. And this is where boundaries get misused, because we think it just is you saying what the boundary is. I'm not open to talking about my conversation, and then that's it. That is not the boundary. That is communicating what the boundary is with the other person, but respecting the boundary is not on them. It's on you, because you cannot control another person's behavior. And this is where I see so often in relationships that boundaries become weaponized. Well, my partner doesn't respect my boundaries. I told them that I don't want them to do this, or I need them to do that. This is my boundary, and they're not respecting it. It's not theirs to respect. It's yours. No one likes to hear that. I see you, and I understand why you don't like that, because I didn't like it either. But at the end of the day, no one is responsible for your boundaries. That's the truth. People are going to show you if they can meet you in them or not, and you will have to choose what to do with that information. So how you will enforce the boundary sounds like, in this example that I'm giving, when you bring up my relationship. Okay, so when you do the thing that I have a boundary around, I am going to need to either walk away, okay, That's one option. I'm going to walk away in order to enforce the boundary because if I'm not there, we cannot have the conversation about it, right? Or ask that we change the subject, meaning I'm still happy to engage in a conversation with you about anything else outside of my relationship. Okay, this is how you will enforce the boundary. Now, what I shared with this member is your mom, like most of us who have not had boundaries, will likely be unable or unwilling to meet your boundary. They will likely not even realize it is a boundary because most of us are not taught this at all. What I want to make so clear is that your mom, partner, coworker, friend not respecting your boundary does not mean that your boundary is not valid. It does not mean that your boundary doesn't deserve to be respected. This is where I see most people who struggle with codependency just be like sitting on their hands and being like, I guess I'm not good enough. See, no one listens to me. That's what I used to say. I set the boundary. No one listens to me. Again, giving your power to the other person, making the other person responsible for your boundary, but they're not responsible for it. And again, that's where we become a victim to the whole situation. The other person not meeting or respecting your boundary simply just means that you're at the hard part of boundaries where you are being invited to take responsibility for it. As Frank deep sighs. I know, buddy. I know. It's the hard part. So when your mom brings up your relationship, which is likely, highly likely, you get to remember how you shared you would enforce it. So you either change the subject, and you don't even have to mention the boundary here. Okay. You don't even have to say, hey, remember, I'm not open to talking about my relationship. You don't even have to say that. You don't even have to give that context. You just hear her saying, like, oh gosh, you're just too young, or whatever her reasoning is. And you get to be like, just nod and be like, so when did you get this plant? So what's for dinner? So have you been to this restaurant that we're planning on going to? How's work? Just change the subject. Just change the subject. That is how we show people that we mean what we say. Instead of being defeated and being like, here we go again, and letting that anxiety build up and then feeling like you need to leave your relationship again, we just get to change the subject. And say you change the subject and they still go on about your relationship, which I'll share a personal story. I know how this goes because I've experienced it. Then you go to the next way that you enforce the boundary, which is removing yourself. So whether that's, oh, hey, I need to go to the bathroom really quick, and you just take a few moments in the bathroom just to create some space around it and not participate in the conversation, whether that's going outside, whether that's leaving altogether, which I know that's like a really hard thing to do. It's uncomfortable. You're only really going to need to do it a few times before people get it. And in that time that you take away, whether that's like you went to another room, you went to the bathroom, you took a moment outside, what I would do at that time is I would place a hand on my heart and I would thank the part of me that is scared in that moment, is probably shaking in her boots. And I just remind her, it is safe for you to set boundaries. It is safe for you to have boundaries. It is safe for you to not want to have this conversation with this person right now about this thing. And it's okay that you're scared, but we're doing it together. Taking that moment to really regulate your nervous system and remind yourself that it is safe for you to be here enforcing boundaries. And if it doesn't feel safe for whatever the reason, emotional, mental abuse, physical abuse, especially, right? To remove yourself. So, a very real example of where I've needed to enforce boundaries with family has actually happened fairly recently. Well, actually, it's been maybe a few years now, but there was a point maybe 2 years after Justin and I had gotten back together, and we had been trying to conceive for a couple years at that point. And every time we went home for the holidays, we would get when are you guys going to have a baby? When is it your turn? When are you guys just baby, 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 baby? And we were getting it from his family. We were getting it from my family. And for me at that point in time, it was a very sensitive subject. Not so much in the first year, but in the second year, I'm going through all these stories of my body's broken, what's wrong with me, why can't we conceive? Like, I am already at basically like the worst headspace I could possibly be in because we want to have kids. And I felt like there was just so much pressure from now our families and just having these conversations like we were not trying. When are you guys going to? And I'm like, any day, like I'm open to it. I'm trying, we're trying. And it got to the point where I was really, really hating going to our family's houses because it was the same conversation every single time. And so there was one Christmas where we were at his dad's house and someone had brought up kids, pretty sure it was his dad. And I just lost it. I just started crying and I said, I'm not able to have a conversation around kids anymore. Like, the conversation around having babies needs to be off the table. I don't want you to ask me how we're doing with it. I don't want you to have conversations with me around if we're going to have kids. Like, know that we are trying and know that we are continuously trying. And if you bring up kids, like, I'm going to leave. And then that was, I think I was a shock to everyone. Like, his whole family was there and I was visibly upset, but it was a boundary I needed to place for my well being because I was already struggling so much with the pressure I was putting on myself. I could not continue to have the pressure from his family or my family. And so the same conversation was had at my family's holiday dinner because, yeah, it was time. It was time for that boundary. And so I had the same conversation with my family. And guess what? No one's bringing up the baby thing with me, like, ever, unless I bring it up first. And that's where I say like boundaries are fluid. Now I'm on the other side of our conception journey where there's a lot more spaciousness, there's a lot more trust. I'm not so sensitive in some ways. So they let me bring it up, and when I bring it up, we get to have conversations around it, but no one's really bringing it up anymore. And that was really great for my mental health, and it was really great to build these connections. People got to see me and support me in this authentic way. Now, that's a good example of I set a boundary, the people in my life respected it. But another example that I know I've used often because it's a great one for what happens when your boundary is not respected comes up with my great grandma, where I've set a boundary with her around talking about my childhood because the way that she perceives it and experienced my childhood and the lens that she has, her perspective is different than mine, right? And whenever we talk about it, she is either invalidating what I think happened, saying that's not how it was like this, da da da. And it's just a mess. And so a boundary that I have is when that starts happening, when I start feeling invalidated in my experience, I usually have these somatic experiences where like my ears get hot, I get shallow breathing. I know I've shared this here with you in the past. I lose feeling in my fingertips and I'm like, okay, this conversation cannot continue. And so I've done a couple things where I share with her my somatic cues. Hey, I'm noticing I'm losing feeling in my fingertips. My ears are getting hot, just telling me I'm dysregulated. So can we please talk about something else? This is me inviting her into meeting my boundary that I need to talk about something else. Right. And I'm giving her an example of what my somatic cues are. So she knows, like, okay, Alyssa's having a body experience that is uncomfortable. So am I able to meet her in that or not? And with my great grandma, it's like I say it and it's just over her head. She pretends like I didn't say anything. Who knows if she even heard me? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. What I know in that moment is that she is showing me, because she's still talking about it, that she is unable to meet me in my boundary. And now I take that information, I take what is, and I do something with it, which is remove myself, right? She is unable to meet me in the boundary. She's showing me where she's at, and this is going to happen all the time. People are either going to be able to meet you in your boundary or not. I always love giving people the opportunity to meet me in the boundary, right? Because that's how you build trust. That's how you build relationships. That's how you build connection. But sometimes people are going to be able to meet you, and sometimes people are not going to be able to meet you. And you don't have to make that mean anything about you or your boundary or your relationship with them. They've just got their own shit going on, and it's none of my business what they've got going on. I don't know why they're unable to meet me. It's not mine to figure out. It's not mine to like put myself in their house to try to figure it out with them or for them, right? It's just, this is what is. They're able to meet me, great, or they're unable to meet me. What do I need to do now to enforce it? And oftentimes with boundaries, it's just to walk away. Put yourself in the other room. Go grab yourself another drink. Go grab yourself some food. Go take a walk, whatever it is. And you don't need to explain it to them. And I think that's the other thing that this part of us likes to do, because we want to be seen as this like person who's right, and then they get to be the person who's wrong. But I really encourage us to even walk away from that paradigm of victim villain, and just, this is what is, right? We don't have to say, you're not respecting my boundary around this, so I'm going to walk away. We just walk away. Because when we say, you're not doing this, and now you're the villain, you're the one who's wrong, guess what? Now they have to defend themselves, and they're going to come and try to make you wrong. And then you have like this tit for tat blaming each other. And that's not building intimacy, and that's not building connection, and that's not making it safe to be vulnerable. What we get to do in those moments is walk away. That speaks so much louder than words, right? We say it all the time, and it's true. Actions speak louder than words. Their actions showing you where they're at, your action is going to show them where you're at. The part of you that needs them to know that they're not respecting your boundary, I would do shadow work around that, because I had to do a lot of exploring. All parts of me were like, they need to know what they're doing wrong. They need to know. Why do they need to know? Because I don't feel safe. They need to know what they're doing wrong so they can fix it, so they can change it, so that I can feel safe. But that is the codependent piece. You need to change who you are so I can feel safe. I only feel safe when you know what you're doing right or wrong. That's just not how it works. We can try to get our safety through others changing. But in my experience, I've always been disappointed. It's never met expectations, because your safety isn't something that you get from somebody else being a certain way. It's from knowing that you will take care of yourself, that you will create an environment for yourself that gives you that safety. And that is empowerment. So there's a little shadow work to play with, because I know it comes up in relationships all the time. I do this with Justin all the time. I need him to know what he's doing wrong, because if he knows, then it will provide me with what? And then that is what I need to look at providing for myself, at least first. It doesn't mean that we don't get to invite our partners or people who we're in relationships with into that. I think that that is the next piece, but it's foundationally making sure that we are not basing our safety, our worthiness, our belonging on someone or something outside of ourselves. And that is the work that we're doing here, right? Okay, babes, I hope that framework was and is supportive for you if you're someone who is looking at creating boundaries, or if you're noticing where there's a need for boundaries, but you're not sure how to structure it. First, that validation, hearing them, what they're saying. I hear you're saying this, this, this. Second, communicating the boundary. I'm not able or willing or open to having a conversation with you about whatever it is. And then thirdly, letting them know how you're going to enforce it. Next time you bring up my relationship, for example, right? I'm going to change the subject, or I'm going to walk away. Thank you for understanding what I need right now. And then when they're unable to meet your boundary, that's your opportunity to enforce it. Getting to the hard part of the boundaries, right? Is the enforcing it. And remembering that that's your responsibility and no one else's. I hope this episode was supportive for anyone out there who is navigating boundaries. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you've got a situation where you're like, hey, can we workshop how I script this boundary with this person around this situation? Make sure you join the membership. It's only $63 for the entire year. That makes it less than $6 a month. And you can ask these questions as many times as you want. You can get support not only from me, but from our community of over 200 people now. And it's just a really sweet place for us to go to when we're activated, when we're triggered, or when we're celebrating things that we are learning and unlearning. I think that's probably one of the sweetest parts about our membership is being able to witness others who are making just these, they seem small, but they're huge shifts and huge ripples, and just showing each other what's possible when we show up messy and do this deep inner work together. Remember, I'm doing a special discount code for podcast listeners in this season of the podcast. So if you've been considering joining the membership, you definitely want to do it in this season of the podcast because you get that special discount code. It's in the show notes or the description box below. It would be an honor to have you in that community and in that group. I look forward to seeing you there. And again, thank you so much for letting me walk alongside you in this journey. It's truly an honor and a privilege. I love you all so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.